Hi, I'm Woo Young Chung, track producer for this session. I'm delighted that you decide to join us for this session. The AI has become such a crucial emerging topic in our field. And in this session, we happen to have two distinguished speakers who will be discussing artificial intelligence and a platform. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to Juan.
Thank you, and super excited to be here with you. I serve as Deloitte Consulting's Chief Data Officer, part of our consulting business. And I have my colleague here, Will, who can do a quick introduction as well.
Thanks, Juan. I'm a partner in our audit and assurance business. My role as the Chief Digital Officer is to deploy technology solutions using all advanced technologies to improve our audit and assurance offerings.
Thanks, Will. So in our session today, and I'd like to really go back to the kickoff and what we heard from sort of the various speakers. In terms of the overall theme for this year's conference around maturing capabilities to really deliver return on investment, as well as what we heard from Professor Cusmano around the business of platforms. I felt those two themes are really appropriate and consistent with sort of Deloitte's journey and how we've transformed and continue to transform our organization to really be fueled and disrupted in many ways by leveraging and harnessing the power of AI. And as we all know, there's lots of challenges. This is a very much inside outlook in terms of what Deloitte has done and how we've progressed our own maturity in this across all of our businesses, and then how that ultimately leads to our ability to serve our clients. As you all know, we're a professional service organization across multiple different disciplines, as well mentioned, in our audit and tax space, and I represent the consulting and advisory side of the house. And so really, really excited about this and how it sort of connects to the broader themes. So with that, let me start with just sort of shaping some broad themes in terms of our journey and the transformation that we've been under. This has been a journey that we've been on for many, many years. This isn't something that you start and stop. I like to think about this really about where can we work smarter versus harder. And I think AI really represents that opportunity for us as an organization. And so as part of that framing, what we looked at, and this is very much, again, in the sort of the business side of what we wanted to do and how we wanted AI and platforms or technology to really help empower us. And so we first wanted to ensure that we were being consistent in sort of the leading edge point of view around AI. And so we can't necessarily be a thought leader in this space without a sort of consistent common voice. And so we launched our Deloitte AI Institute to really serve as the tip of the spear, taking on some of the biggest challenges as it relates to AI, and really helping not only ourselves, but also our clients in that agenda shaping journey. And as part of that, one of the super exciting announcements we made probably about 6 months ago was the launch of the Deloitte Center for AI Computing, which is powered by our supercomputer from NVIDIA. That is really a game-changing step in our journey, again, to be an AI-powered organization. And we've heard, from the keynote session this morning, just around the importance of ethics and how we're applying unbiased algorithms to the automation and capabilities that we're offering through this platform. And so it's very important to understand all those elements as they are critical to how we ultimately design and build our technology capabilities. And so when you think about what we actually build, and we'll spend the majority of our time on what we've built and our common platform that we refer to as CortexAI really took into effect all these various points, right? From our points of view, our thought leadership, some of the toughest challenges that are being faced out in the market with our AI Institute, from our ability to generate and run petabytes of algorithms, in nanoseconds with our supercomputer. All these have been sort of elements and sort of points in our journey as we continue to power, our firm, with more AI-enabled capabilities. And so with that, I'll go into a little bit more detail on sort of the business of our platform and how it's really supporting, all of our different lines of business. The first thing here is really around our ability to build on all the various connections that we as an organization have. And I'll be the first one to tell you that, platform and the technology side of it is important, and there's lots of learnings in how to architect, integrate, and sort of bring the best of breed ecosystem. But we didn't start with that, and that was by design. We wanted to ensure that we understood what the businesses needed to ensure that we were building, on Deloitte's 175-year history. And that's really the important part of the connections that we as a professional organization bring. And so with that premise and background on how to design and build a platform, we needed to ensure that it was flexible. Each of our businesses is very, very distinct and unique. What we do in audit is very different from what we do in advisory, as an example. And so we needed to ensure we were going to design and build a common platform that it had the flexibility to adapt and mature and help drive this sort of AI-powered set of services to our clients. And so that was extremely important. We also wanted to ensure that as part of that overall architecture, the various components had the ability to sort of plug in and plug in or plug out, if you will, to meet those demands. And so there's a set of technology components in the platform that we sort of think about as workbenches or workspaces that really helps us go from the data management set of capabilities to ingest data, to the data governance, data quality capabilities, to the visualization and consumption capabilities, as well as a workbench around the ML AI ops capabilities, right? And so you start bringing all these various components together, and that's what allows us to give us, right, our organization, the ability to bring this into a common platform and provide that flexibility for each of our businesses. I'll speak specifically on two examples that we have here. In terms of our consulting and advisory business, this platform is the single development environment that our entire practice uses to build any AI-powered asset or solution. And so if you start thinking about the return on investment and the value that this is driving, our teams are no longer having to go and provision environments, negotiate licenses, do some of the integration across these capabilities. And so the return on investment truly is about allowing our professional service organization, our client service teams, go from ideation to an asset and a solution in weeks, not years. And so that core code base, the common services that you would need to have in an industrial AI platform to scale for the use cases of our clients is something that we've been able to really amplify in terms of time to market. And that's a great example of how we're delivering value based on this common platform in our consulting business. The same is for our government business. So when we think about our federal and state practice, there's lots of requirements in addition to some of the base core components that we've enabled that need to be ensured. For example, the FedRAMP compliant. And so those initial set of requirements have also been applied into this common platform that we then work with our federal and state practice to then serve our clients. And so those are really just two good examples on, you know, the power and the value that the platform is delivering on our behalf. Will, would you like to add some examples for audit and tax?
Yeah, Juan, and I think I want to emphasize that you mentioned our almost 200-year history. And so we have an interesting juxtaposition here of businesses that are working with clients every day to develop the newest solutions relevant to their organizations, as well as our legacy regulated businesses, which are audit and tax, which have 175 years of workflow behind them. And so on top of the platforms that we're talking about, we have customized workflow and experiences for our tax and audit professionals. There's a question that came in through the chat, and we're happy to take those as this goes along. But one of the questions is around what's the role of the chief data officer in this topic. And I will say that even though you have a common platform, and Juan's absolutely right that being able to deploy new environments and software is really critical, there's inevitably going to be builds that occur in a large organization that are somewhat siloed. And ultimately, when you connect those things back together or try to bring them together to harmonize your data, having critical reference data that's standard and consistent across the organization as a common glue, if you will, is really a critical role in any platform strategy. And it's almost impossible to have common data models throughout every application, every workflow, and every asset that you create, but a common core that lets you connect together different business data is a really critical element to make these platforms successful, over the long term.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, Will, and thanks for calling out the questions here. I pulled up the chat. I can absolutely answer in terms of my role as it relates to the platform and sort of our broader data strategy. We made the decision not to separate sort of the business of data and how our organization is leveraging and harnessing sort of data as a critical asset from the technology enablement of those capabilities. And so my role within consulting is both driving our overall data strategy, which again is part of the broader business strategy and how data is supporting that. And then defining the strategy and the execution of the technology, which in this case is our CortexAI platform. So I oversee both the technology and sort of the data strategy side to ensure it comes together. And I can tell you that in some cases, I have how do I say it? I have both the privilege and the challenge to have some trade-off in those two dimensions, right? So it's never super easy and super black and white. Sometimes we want to do something from a platform perspective that doesn't necessarily maybe move the needle as fast or as big as we want from a business perspective. But I do think being in sort of that combined role has been helpful to ensure we don't lose sight ultimately on the return of this investment. And so for me, again, I think it's been kind of a really good journey in being able to have that role as the CDO, as well as leading and driving the strategy, the architecture, and the implementation of the platform. All right. Well, do you want to cover some of the big themes here?
So probably familiar to everyone on this phone, this presentation is you go and talk with all the business leadership team, and essentially the question comes up of, well, how are we using AI? How are we going to put AI into our process? Where is our AI strategy? And so we've spent a considerable amount of time thinking about those customized workflows because AI is not a goal unto itself. And we spent a lot of time talking about what that means. It's not just use AI for the sake of AI. And we came up with a couple of key areas that we found in the professional services business, and hopefully these will resonate with you, types of techniques that lend themselves to use cases that I thought I would share with everyone here. The first is that in the auditing profession and in the tax profession, we are looking at a lot of data across a wide variety of clients. Deloitte, audits 25% of the public issuer market and also private companies. And so we're scanning across a lot of data, and historically we've used people to go through and validate and verify information. We've found a particular use case where in certain instances, we can use things like clustering algorithms to kind of give the professional a little bit of a leg up on that activity. So can we identify an outlier for that professional? Can we identify an anomaly for them to investigate using an algorithm, perhaps a trained algorithm, perhaps an unsupervised algorithm that gives them a faster start, if you will, on their processes in either tax analysis or in auditing, where you're looking for potential errors or mistakes. And so that was one particular technique that we found that was really resonated with our workflows that we've built. Another is that across this broad spectrum of clients, we do have business rules. So we're not, I think there's an interesting trade-off point to be discussed in general about software, about do you go with a rules-based system or do you have a completely flexible knowledge hierarchy? And in our case, we do have business rules that make a lot of sense, and there's really no reason to try to kind of crowdsource those out of the data. And so we have plenty of business rules and entities that are inside of our workflows, our structures, and those things connect to each other and can be connected to each other in flexible ways for certain outcomes. And because of the number of clients that we're serving, putting hard and fast rules about the relationships amongst those entities is really difficult. And it leads to questions about, do we have a complete set of information when it comes time to deliver on our deliverable to our ultimate client. And so we found that knowledge graphs is an interesting area, because if we could take all our different business entities and then the relationships between them, create knowledge graphs, and then use those knowledge graphs to try to see where particulars for a specific client may or may not exist. That's a fruitful area for detecting places where we may have more work to do, where the process may be incomplete. So knowledge graph representation is kind of an overlay on top of a set of business rules for distinct entities and objects is a key area. And then finally, even though what I'm speaking about are accountants and the accountancy profession, probably half of what we do is in written language. So it's not all just numbers. And a lot of the things that we spend time on are analyzing contracts, looking at materials, trying to assess different business processes, different contractual terms. And so natural language processing has been a critical area for us to focus in applying AI into our business. Parsing out large contracts, invoices, purchase orders, anything that's being created in the business world to extract key entities, the who, what, when, where, why, whom, et cetera, and trying to use that again to give our people a bit of a leg up on the processing element of their job downstream in the workflows. So those are three areas I thought that I would highlight for how AI is embedded in our platform. It's not AI to be AI, it's AI to reach an outcome, which we'll talk about a little bit next. If you want to add one, or you want to flip to the next slide. So when we think about a profession like auditing or tax accountancy that has been around for a long time, we have a historical process we've been following for a long time, a ton, years and years and years and years and years. And it's traditionally been a model where a professional who spent their entire career training, getting expertise, serving clients, and really has built that knowledge base up over time, spends time with a client to solve their distinct problem. And so we thought about, well, where does AI play a role in that process? And so the depiction at the bottom is an example of how we think about this. And in particular, we still think that the professional who's built up knowledge, experience, and provide context to problems is very relevant in that client service interaction. However, what we've done is we've built a system that captures those judgments as they occur, and a feedback loop that can give information to the professional, suggestions, recommendations, those kinds of things, in advance of the interaction, so that that person comes to that interaction with more context, more information than they otherwise would have. And because that system is powered by the entire breadth of our client service portfolio, it's far more comprehensive than any one professional could hope to achieve over their collective career. So essentially, it's an accelerator to what we see as an already in place client service business. And we see the benefits of that in that it helps to prevent and detect where in our process we may have quality mistakes or quality errors. It helps us identify those faster and be able to remediate those sooner, which provides a better customer service experience. And it also helps with delivering specific insights, things that are unique about a client that maybe that client didn't know. And so we're able to accelerate workflows, identify outliers, and help our client service professionals get to the heart of what really matters faster by deploying AI in a professional services context. Juan, do you want to talk a little bit about how you use it in the consulting business?
Yes. Yeah. So just two additional examples on how we're harnessing the power of AI. One is our Smart Force capabilities, and so think of these as digital workers, digital FTEs, as often referred to. And what we looked across sort of our distinct businesses in consulting, specifically those that are more technology oriented in terms of implementing, a package solution or delivering, data modernization projects and doing large, data ingestion, data migration type of work. We really wanted to focus on those key components of sort of our portfolio of work, and then begin to identify areas of that work that can be automated, right? That could bring in machine learning and automation to really reduce all those human tasks. And as we've said, and we all recognize, this isn't about machines with machines. This is about humans with machines, and our ability to integrate our Smart Force capability into the implementation of some of these large technology programs has really developed sort of that return on investment and how it's fueling the transformation of our business. And so just some simple examples of where we've been able to take out anywhere between 30 to even 60% of the work. You think about the highly time intensive activities like validating data. I still remember where we used to go through a data migration process, and then you'd submit all the data that's been migrated and it's been transformed from system A to system B, and then you would generate this report, and it would show sort of the where the anomalies were, right? Where were there gaps, and where does there need to be additional human intervention to ensure that the data was transformed properly. And you would submit that to all the data stewards as an example. And those data stewards would get the report, and they'd go one by one by one by one by one. You think about what I just described and how in that sort of overall process, the amount of time, the number of people that were involved to ultimately say, yes, the data was transformed properly. That's a great example of where our Smart Force capability can reduce that by 50 and 60%, and so that you're not necessarily reviewing and approving all the transformations, but you're also bringing in, and Will sort of talked about this, but this sort of learning construct of when you submit a data validation report to a data steward, and they can identify certain patterns that maybe the algorithm didn't pick up. Those can then be applied back to the algorithm, so that the next time that we run through that same data migration or transformation, the algorithm has learned from the initial report, right? And so the more you run through that, obviously, the smarter it gets, and it continues to then minimize, right, the requirement for human intervention. And so it only ensures that overall, not only the quality of the data is higher and more appropriate and more correct, but it also then gives that time to these data stewards or data analysts, data professionals that are out there to really go and focus on tasks that are really more appropriate, right, for their overall role and responsibility. And so that's just really one good example of where the SmartForce capability that again was built on our common CortexAI platform is driving and transforming the way we deliver technology implementations for our clients in consulting. The other really good example is around the data marketplace that we've developed as part of the platform. I said at the beginning, this is really about the business of the platform. And I'll be the first one to tell you that it's great to have all this technology and all these different components that are integrated, but how are we going to power these SmartForce agents to really go and execute their task? And the reality is they need data. And without data, this platform, as great with all the bells and whistles that it has, really isn't going to execute and activate on anything. And so it was extremely critical for us to develop a cross-functional, sort of overall business data blueprint to ensure that we had enough of these sort of data dimensions to power and enable all the various use cases that are required, to support, our consulting business. And so what you see here on the right-hand side is very much a functional decomposition of this semantic layer of data that's integrated into the platform that ultimately allows us to drive better insights, right? Better machine learning, better algorithms with the power of the data that we've collected. And this data is both third-party data as well as our own proprietary data, as well as public data. So it is a mixed breed of data types all around sort of these various functional components. All right, I think there's a chat about, Barry, I think you got that there. Increase the font. Okay. So those are just two examples from a consulting perspective on again, sort of the business of the platform and how we're bringing this to our client service teams. With that, I'll then transition into what we've learned. And again, I encourage folks to ask questions and those get routed to Will and I. But as I mentioned in the beginning, this has been a journey we've been on for many, many years. I'll hit on the first one and then I'll pass it over to Will. But, I think one of the biggest pivots and shifts for us, and I really keep going back to the business of the platform, is, early on, it was really, designed, hardwired, more of a solution versus a product. And so I think thinking about, your AI platform more as a product versus a solution that is built to do X, Y, Z, gives you a lot more of that flexibility. And I think it challenges some of the maybe initial architecture principles to ensure that it's going to give you that flexibility, that scalability to adapt to any business need or use case that comes up. And so for us, that was one really, really big learning. And I think when we went from, the platform as a solution that's solving this problem to the platform as a product that is enabling, various sets of assets or services, our ability to serve those different, consumers of the platform really accelerated in a very positive way. And so one of the things I mentioned was just around the return on investment. We wouldn't be able to support our client service teams in the time and speed that we do today if we would have continued to design and build this platform sort of very solution oriented and not product oriented. And so I think that was one big lesson for us that has, paid significant dividends. Will?
Yeah, I mean, another lesson learned is, the trade-off between building and buying different components. There can be a desire in some cases to build everything yourselves, and you got to realize what your core competencies are. But then there are some things that you have proprietary knowledge over and specific workflows that you need arranged in a certain way, or outcomes that you need, that it does make sense to build on top of a purchased platform, so that you can take advantage and can get directly to what it is that you're trying to achieve. And so there's many things that we've built on our own, and then there's core components of the platform, core software elements that we've purchased because we understand where our potential limitations are and where platform providers may offer a better solution for a fair cost. There is a question that someone has asked about, the role of chatbots and what else can you put in a website besides chatbots that are AI specifically. And I'll give my perspective, and then Juan, you can add to that too. But from my perspective, the website is all about content curation, and it depends on the subject matter that you're dealing with. For example, we have websites, internal websites that may help CPAs reach really complicated, difficult conclusions about highly complex accounting matters. And that's a website. We may be able to use machine learning and AI to present the right information to them at the right time. And that is a use case, and that's content curation. Another website might be a commercial product where you're trying to sell someone a particular good or service. And at the time of checkout, you need to present them with an add-on good or service, and that's content curation. So it's all about putting the information on the screen at the right time. And chatbots are a way for people to kind of self-help. Like if they can't find what they need, they can ask some questions and whatnot. But a really, really good website that gets you to what your either user is or client or customer or professional needs really shouldn't need a chatbot in some ways. It should be about getting the information to them directly. Juan, I don't know if you want to take that particular question too.
Yeah, I think another use case that is along maybe similar lines, but sort of a bit different, is just really around when we think about sort of the data governance side of the capabilities as well as the activities. One of the things that we often find is, people are asking, what data do we have? What is that business glossary? Where can I find it? What is the lineage? And so one of the innovative things we did was develop a digital data chatbot where you could ask these questions to that agent in a way that then goes and finds the appropriate answers from okay, these are the data standards, or this is the business glossary for our customer domain as an example, or our client domain as an example, and then provide different SLAs around the quality of that data. And so I thought that was an interesting use of sort of some of the standard chatbot functionality, which is still very much similar to very service oriented. You want to engage, you want to ask questions in a simple way, but I thought it was applied to let's say a more data governance application, which I thought was really great, and we got a lot of saw a lot of great success in that.
Another question we have, Juan, is about how would you start an AI maturity assessment? Where would you start? How do you kick that off? What are the key elements of it? I don't know if you've got a perspective working with clients on that particular.
Sure. The overall maturity assessment, I think for me is really about the business problems, goals, or objectives that you're trying to solve. And again, we'll sort of use our own journey, our Deloitte journey in this is, it was very much that transformation / disruptive point of view to say, look, within our consulting scope of services, these are the things that we know we need to transform and disrupt. And so taking sort of those overall business goals, ambitions, challenges, and then defining and working your way through, okay, what are the technology capabilities that I need? Chances are, at least in my experience in working with clients, you probably have 70–80% of the technology, sort of solution defined somewhere in your four walls. The other challenge we see in that assessment is the data, as I mentioned. And so I don't think we've applied, or I don't think many clients look at the importance of the data to drive, sort of this AI platform. So I think that's another key dimension in this assessment. And so one, the business, right? The business goals, the business aspirations have to be key. You need to ensure that you have the right sort of technology capabilities to support that. And then the third dimension would be the data that ultimately fuels and powers, the AI platform. Those would be the sort of three high-level dimensions of the assessment, and how we apply that to, our own maturity of where we were and where we are now.
Yeah, that's great, and leads into the next question, which I've got a little bit of perspective on, and it fits with Deloitte's business model as well, is how do you think about an enterprise data strategy versus business group level? And within Deloitte is a professional services firm, but we do have our 4 distinct business lines. And so data harmonization is something we've considered. And I've had many discussions with developers and architects about kind of lessons learned from data projects gone wrong, where someone tried to maybe boil the entire ocean at once. And you spend the entirety of your time trying to figure out the perfect data model for every single business problem that you have. And given the size and scale of your business, that could very well be a major inhibitor to innovation and iteration. But what I've also found is if you ignore it completely, your data scientists, when they go to develop a new solution, will spend almost all their time trying to reconcile key business data. And so what we've settled on for the moment is we do have a common core of key enterprise data that is consistent. And as being a client service business, you can imagine for us, that has to do with things like, who is the client? Do they have distinct reference numbers? Do we have the similar categorization for clients into different kinds of industries, different kinds of service offerings? Can we take everything that we do and put it in the context of the client and have a common understanding across all businesses as to who that client is, so that when we go to then join other business data together, we have that common structure, if you will, by which to do it. And without that, we would have a real trouble trying to see across the enterprise. So I'd suggest there's a balance, frankly, between an enterprise data strategy and business units that are operating, independently.
Yeah, and I think if I could just add to that, maybe a little bit more operating model structure, as well described. So within Deloitte in our 4 businesses, we do have a CDO in each of the businesses, and we've formed a council of CDOs that sort of help ensure what we need to do at the enterprise level is integrated and coordinated to the efforts and initiatives we're driving within each of our different businesses. And so that is the sort of construct that really allows us to go fast where we need to, as well as ensure that we're building common capabilities across the entire enterprise. And so, I wish I could tell you that a 50-50 split, but it really comes down to the use case at hand and making the right decision that says, look, we're going to build this capability, as an example, in our advisory business because they need it now. They can build it today faster. And then we bring it back to sort of the center and scale it out across the enterprise, right? And so some of those trade-offs absolutely happen. And it kind of goes back to the business of this platform is we're investing in this platform and sort of using use case by use case to make those decisions to ultimately drive and transform our organization. And so hopefully maybe that adds a little more of the how we enable and sort of help establish that sort of balance across the business versus the enterprise.
I think even to further expand on that, I mean, within a single business, we have defined product teams that may go out and want to build their own unique product, because what we're trying to balance is that speed to market, right? And the learning that we have gone through, and I'd suggest factoring into any conversations you may have with your senior leadership teams about that trade-off, is that there will come a day when a product that is successful on its own, you do want to re-platform it into the center, because ultimately the overarching maintenance, support, knowledge, overhead cost of maintaining that product in isolation is going to become a burden for the overall organization, and you're going to want to extend those capabilities out into other areas. And the key thing that everyone needs to have an understanding of, so that you can get on with that journey, is there will be a cost. There will be a replatforming cost. And so if you do build in isolation for speed to market purposes, which can be really, really, really important, because maybe you have an opportunity to get to the market quick and to use this product to expand revenue, which is what the primary purpose of the organization really should be. Later on, when you go to optimize cost, there will be an incremental investment needed to re-platform the product and to lower long-term cost. But that is an important trade-off to be able to manage. And I don't think that there is a perfect solution of saying, well, every single product has to be built centrally and under this framework, because you will then jeopardize potentially speed to market, which can be a critical element to success and ROI.
Yep. Great. I mean, I think through the questions we've hit a lot of the lessons learned, right? We talked about buy versus build. We've talked about the overall governance and how do you build a platform to support the enterprise, yet given the agility and speed that the businesses need. We've talked about the importance of the data. And so if there's, I don't know if there's any other questions that are coming in or that folks might have, but we're happy to answer any more and continue to sort of share our journey and kind of what we've done and what we've learned from that.
Now, while we're waiting for see if a couple more questions come in before we wrap up the session, it really, I mean, the data is super important, like we talked about, but then embedding the AI in workflows is critical. AI is not something you do for itself, right? If someone comes to you in the organization says, give me your AI product, unless you're actually providing an AI product, I mean, there are certain companies that is their business, but unless you're doing that, it should be in some cases transparent to the person who's using the particular solution. That being said, because of the uncertainty that comes with AI products, because they are probabilistic models in most cases, there is an element of design that's important. And we talked at the very beginning about this, about trustworthy AI and ethical tech, which is something that is an important element of our overarching tech strategy. And so while you want the AI to be, or machine learning or advanced algorithm to be embedded into the workflow so that people aren't having to understand the different elements behind it, you also need them to understand what they're getting. You don't want to present an outcome or recommendation from an AI engine as a fact unless you know it's a fact. We've developed in certain instances, scoring models. In certain instances, we've developed kind of attribution models to suggest that here's a recommendation that's being produced. Here are the 3 attributes that led us to that recommendation. Maybe they don't cover the 100 attributes that really went into it, but at the 3 top. We've used probability thresholds, confidence intervals, those kinds of things to communicate to people who are using the application that they are in a probabilistic world and they can't just take a given outcome as fact, which is a potential to happen, and you can find mistakes. Because in our experience, while these workflow accelerators that are based on machine learning are great, and they can cover, like I mentioned before, far more breadth than any person could ever hope to, when they do fail and they do miss things because they can be brittle in some cases, they can fail pretty spectacularly. So important to kind of have those brakes, those guardrails on, so that your ultimate users of the solution don't suffer any consequence from that potential failure. the question, we have a question here about aligning data strategy with enterprise strategy. And so maybe I misinterpreted the prior question, although I think we hit on an important point here there. You know, enterprise strategy comes down to, you know, what are your outcomes and goals for the enterprise? What are you trying to achieve? Is it expansion of your customer base? Is it developing a certain kind of product? I mean, there's lots of things about enterprise strategy. Data strategy is obviously an enabler of that, and needs to align almost as a sub goal of it, but it's not a data strategy is not something to itself. You know, your data strategy could be, we need to harmonize key customer data because we need the ability to market products better to our customers to improve our revenue throughput in this particular product line to achieve our overall enterprise strategy. You know, that could be how you bring it together. It's not as if they're two isolated circles that sit next to each other per se. And so you take your enterprise strategy and then you would think about how does data strategy flow into achieving those particular goals.
Yeah, no, and I think just to add to that, I think you hit it. Having a independent data strategy is not the way to go about it. Depending on your organization, there's business planning sessions, right, that occur, you know, both annually and quarterly for us. And as a chief data officer, you have to have sort of a seat at that table to understand what that business strategy or enterprise strategy is, and ensure that the voice of data is absolutely anchored in those discussions to then ultimately drive, right, what needs to be done from a data perspective. And so that would be my ad and sort of push to ensure that you're in those conversations so that, you know, you can make the right decisions as it relates to, you know, sort of your data journey and overall agenda.
Yeah, one question here about the adoption rate of these kinds of products, and also as a professional services firm, do we kind of sit between the bespoke in-house build and the off-the-shelf buy? I think the answer to that question is yes, and we help clients on their journey to find the optimal between the two and to stand up capabilities. But maybe you can talk about adoption of things like CortexAI, Juan, and also the where a professional services firm plays a role that has capabilities on kind of both sides.
Yeah, and that's where I think, so I'll take the build versus buy first. If our overall business goal for the platform, right, is to truly change the way we deliver client services broadly, right? So just at the highest macro level, that is the goal of the platform. And so in order to do that, we don't want to get into well, we got to build everything. There's obviously capabilities out there that would already provide us, you know, 10%, 20%, 30%, 40% of the requirements. And it gives us that flexibility that we need to ultimately transform our business. And so that is a super important guideline in the architecting, in the designing and the building of the platform. And so you take that as this is our platform that we use to transform our business. How does that then apply to the actual services that we're providing to our clients, which, as Will said, right, either have some or different technology components that we've built. And so our platform is multi-cloud, and so it can run on any of the cloud environments that are out there. And so we've understanding that dimension and that flexibility and the need to deploy in different parts with different technologies, different bill of materials, if you will. We have a little bit of that flexibility depending on the asset or solution that we've built on the platform for that client service engagement. It's given us some of that flexibility. I'll be the first one to tell you it's not fully 100%. We can go from this tech stack to this tech stack. There are some constraints there, but I think we understand that the dilemma of we're building this for us, although we're building these assets on the platform that ultimately are delivered for our clients that might have a different sort of bill of material than what we built. And so not fully solved, but I think we know that's a consideration in how we built this. I think I saw another question just on the demo of the platform. Be more than happy to provide that. If you could reach out to myself or Will via the app, we'll be more than happy to coordinate that.
And just in terms of adoption rates, that's a hard thing to get your arms around. We know that everyone's talking about it, not necessarily CortexAI specifically, but these types of solutions. I mean, companies, based on our surveys that we've taken with business leaders, one of the top priorities of CEOs is digital transformation. And while digital transformation may just mean, automation and some workforce shifts and those kinds of things, every good digital transformation strategy I've seen has an element of advanced algorithmic solutions attached to the end of it. If you're not trying to get to that, then you're kind of in a pure automation play, which is fair and can be. But most organizations have a longer term goal of not only automating certain business processes or automating certain things, but also delivering the next service, delivering something that's differentiated and unique. And usually that involves some element of an advanced algorithm. And so some element of an AI solution in the future. And so we know that the business leaders, based on our surveys, are thinking about digital transformation. We know that the pandemic has accelerated that thinking. As companies have had to deal with the remote environment, their infrastructure may have handled it very well, and they were able to handle remote work, or may have not handled it very well. And they realized that there was an infrastructure investment needed to bolster their digital capabilities. And when you start to peel back, well, what's the benefit of it? You either get to automation and some kind of liberation of cost, or you get to, and hopefully both, some element of product differentiation, new service, new offering, and that has to do with some kind of AI in most cases.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing I would add there around adoption is, like anything, once you start defining metrics and measuring, people start to change behavior. And so we've developed a dashboard scorecard that really gives leadership a view on the usage of the platform. And it's pretty extensive in terms of the different metrics and the different categories, but it's more than just the, what you would think of, well, how many people are logging on, how many people have been trained, how many people have been certified, to the number of assets that have been built, to financial metrics, right? So I would say at any point in your journey in developing and leveraging an AI platform, absolutely start with metrics and measuring against those metrics, even if when you start, they don't look that great. It's going to absolutely begin to change, I think, behavior and culture. And so that would be, I think, another sort of lesson learned that we implemented as we, developed the platform is here's our measure, right? And we're being critical, we're being transparent. And, if you want these metrics to look better, we need your help, we need your support. And so that would be another really good, another good lesson learned there.
So I think we've covered all the questions, and it's about 5 minutes left to get to the next session. While there's no hike across a conference hall in a virtual environment, so we don't have to let you out early necessarily. I think we've covered almost everything that we had on our agenda. Feel free to reach out to Juan or myself with follow-up questions. Happy to take those, show product demos, those kinds of things. But we have a break now, I think, until 11:30 is when the next session begins. So for some of you, that will be time to get lunch, and for others, just to check email and do other things. But thank you guys for everyone joining our session. We really appreciate it. Great conversation. Appreciate the questions. Juan, do you have anything you'd like to add in?
No, likewise. Thank you, guys. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you for your excellent presentation. It was very intriguing, and we learned a lot from it. And I would like to thank all those people who attended this session. Yes, the next session will begin at 11:30. So we have a little bit of break between the sessions. Thank you.